Well, it's been very nice to hear people talking, Gretchen and Robert, and things that Robert was saying, very pertinent to what I want to say, actually. So the terms he used, positive and negative emotions, Buddha completely would agree. This is exactly how Buddha talks. And what's interesting also is His Holiness referred yesterday to these Indians, and I remember hearing him recently say it was these Indians, these Hindus actually, these amazing masters, thinkers, scientific, thinkers, who more than 3,000 years ago were the ones who really began this extraordinary investigation into the nature of self, And somehow that's what's informed the Buddhist teachings. Buddha came out of that amazing tradition and then diverged in his own direction, particularly in relation to his own direct experiential findings about this self, about how things exist. And so what's interesting also, His Holiness mentioned this model of the mind, the one that's come from the Indians. That's also the basis of all the study that goes on in the Tibetan monastic university system, which is the system that I've been educated in, to some extent, that's studied, And I think it's kind of interesting because the way we think of it, when we think mind in the West, we think brain, and there's nothing wrong with that, but the Buddha would be very clear in saying your mind is not the brain. And so the investigation for the Buddhist is an internal one. You don't need to use a microscope. If you were asked one of these amazing meditators, these marvelous beings sitting up in their caves the last 50, 60 years in Tibet, where their brain is, they'd have no idea. But they all certainly know their minds. And so, but at the same time, as His Holiness, as we all know, has been doing this incredible investigation and communication with thinkers, Western thinkers, the modern thinkers, the last 30, 40 years about these topics, and we can find incredible meeting points. So, I'm going to be talking from the Buddhist perspective, but we're going to see it's very familiar. It's not as if Buddha owns this stuff. He's not a creator. He's observed it. He's observed every word that I'm saying here, even though it's in colloquial Australian. It's coming from these extraordinary great thinkers, first the Indians and then through the tradition, for me, of the Tibetans, these last, thousands of years. So this positive, negative, it sounds like simple points, But this is the basis of actually Buddha's model, Buddha's way of describing the contents of this mental consciousness of ours. And the question, of course, is the point. What do you do when you don't get what you want? What do you do when the bad things happen? And this really is the fundamental point that's assumed in the Buddhist model. The contents of our mind for the Buddha, the mental consciousness, and they point here, the Tibetans certainly point here. The contents of our mind, Buddha divides into three categories. It's like a deceptively simple way of dividing the contents of our mind. They use the terms positive, negative, and neutral, and these are like technical terms. Neutral refer to all those ones we all need. They're like the mechanics of the mind. Remember, I'm not talking about the brain. Like concentration and remembering what to do and identifying this from that. There's many, many of these parts of the mind that whether you're a meditator or a murderer, they have to work well for you to do your job properly. So they're neither virtuous nor non-virtuous. They're neither positive nor negative, and we've got masses of those. But the key ones that if you want to use the Buddha's modeling, the Buddha's methods in your mind to be your own therapist, as Lama Yeshe would put it, knowing your own thoughts and feelings and emotions, That's the stuff. And so the stuff that we need to look into are the ones that are called positive and negative. And initially it's deceptive. These terms seem so cute, But the implication of these in Buddhist psychology is really profound, and the intricacy and the precision that's used to identify these different states of mind. So if we're not talking about the brain, how do you investigate these? Well, the best we can talk often in our culture is we talk about knowing what we feel. But what's interesting in the Buddhist model, once you've, say, developed these practical techniques called concentration meditation, this marvelous psychological technique, actually, that came from these incredible Indians, they were the ones who came up with this extraordinary technique that's the basis of what we call these days mindfulness meditation, the variations that are around in the West. You learn this technique, which is simply a concentration technique. It's not holy. A communist can do it very well, Got no religious overtones whatsoever. So it's a practical skill that enables you to focus your mind, not be all over the place, So that with that focus, which is not enough, you then need to have this, if you're a Buddhist, or using the Buddhist model, you need to have the understanding of the contents of your mind, the basic description of what you're going to be observing. And this is where you have to learn this skill of distinguishing between the so-called positive and negative. So Robert's point is brilliant. You need the discomfort. We need to have access to the unhappy ones, not to sort of push them away or live in denial of them. That's plain foolish, And this is the point in our culture. we either vomit all out our bad feelings, and that's called anger, and I'm very good at that one. I've done personal research since I'm born. I know that one intimately and well. You vomit out what you feel when things go wrong, or you suppress and you deny. And they're about almost the only two options we have. But this option here, this one of having some focus, understanding the bare bones of the Buddhist model, and that means clearly what is a negative state, what are its characteristics, precisely, and what's a positive one, precisely what are its techniques. And this is a crucial element in Buddhist psychology. And the long term, of course, for the Buddha is that these negative ones are adventitious, as they say. Well, you need a dictionary for that. I don't use it in my daily life. Adventitious means that these are not at the core of our being. And this is the basis of all of the Buddha's techniques, which is an outrageous concept. To think that attachment, anger, jealousy, pride, low self-esteem are not at the core of your being, and the Buddha's finding being that you can get rid of these. I mean, this is pretty shocking, If one of you is a therapist out there and I come and ask you to give me some techniques to get rid of all anger, all jealousy, all fear, all attachment, all low self-esteem, and develop infinite love and compassion for all beings all the time, you would think I'm mentally ill and give me a pill to calm me down. But this is precisely what Buddha is saying. This is what he means by nirvana, not some place like heaven, It's the term loosely, you can say, used to refer to the mind of the person having taken on board these techniques, using Buddha's model as your basis for interpreting and identifying what's there, so that you can unpack and unravel what's there and eventually deconstruct and eventually get rid of these states of mind. So the key to knowing, understanding this, is to understand how these feelings, as we call them, these feelings, are based in being conceptual, informed by conceptual stories. So in other words, all these negative states of mind, starting with attachment, which is the one that desperately wants the chocolate not to run out, and then when it does run out, it has a panic attack, and that's what then gives rise to what's called aversion, the strong aspect of which is anger. And this is an amazing concept, actually. That anger, one way of defining almost what anger is anger is the response when attachment doesn't get what it wants. And once we understand this and the other states of mind, and there are many mentioned, of course, once we really become familiar with how these states of mind function, then we can identify them, and then we can start to argue with them, because they're conceptual stories, and that's what's surprising. I mean, me, as I said, I have deep knowledge of anger. Since I'm born, it was like, my mother didn't have to teach me. I knew it well. So once I understood, the Buddhist view that that's the response when attachment doesn't get what it wants, that's the one to focus on, and that's the one that's hard to see. This attachment, this word is so cute, We use it in many ways, and in our culture we would use it almost synonymously with closeness or love or affection. And this is why, and this is surprising to us too, we know that we need to be precise and clear and accurate in our definitions if we're talking even about how to make a chocolate cake. If you don't know what a teaspoon is, you're in trouble. You'll make a mess, So the same precision and clarity is what the Buddha would demand we use, to investigate this mind of ours, these thoughts, these feelings. This is the key to success. And this is, of course, for the Buddha, the key to happiness. In the simplest sense you could say for the Buddha, happiness. For us, basically he's saying, and that's the kind of happiness they mentioned yesterday, I forget those Greek words, related to hedonistic, I think. That one, the good feeling good. The way we in our world think of happiness, which is when you get the chocolate, which is basically what we think is what you get when attachment gets what it wants. And that for the Buddha, this attachment is this default mode that's so deeply ingrained, so primordial within us, we don't even notice it until it doesn't get what it wants. This is the trick, it's so hard. And so using these techniques, we have to learn to be able to observe this attachment, and really it's multifaceted as far as Buddha is concerned. It's this, almost the first level of it, the energetic level of attachment is this intense sense of dissatisfaction. And we can see we're born with this, a deep feeling, an assumption, which we think is the absolute truth, that I'm not enough, that I don't have enough. No matter what I get, it's never enough. And it's just this constant feeling. Therefore, naturally, if there's dissatisfaction, the next level of attachment is you hanker after something. This sense that you haven't got enough means there's something missing. And where do we first look? Where do we first hanker? Obviously, the objects of the senses. We're these sensory beings. We're embodied sensory beings. So we look out there for the 5 sense objects. And depending on the ones we've got connection with, we will continually be searching without even intellectually understanding it, constantly waiting for something to grab us. And then the assumption, which is again of attachment, another function, is the assumption. Well, first of all, no, this attachment, when it gets that object, like the chocolate cake, it'll make the chocolate cake look really delicious. We don't think that we're making the cake look delicious. This is a shock to us. We think the cake is delicious. But the way the Buddha's saying is whatever's in your mind, whatever appears to you out there is seen in the aspect of what's in your mind. So if you've got attachment, this neediness, this expectation, this dissatisfaction, deeply instinctive. You're walking along being a normal person here, not looking like a junkie. This is normal attachment. It's working constantly underneath. Then the eyes see that shape and colour. You interpret it as chocolate cake and all the story starts. And before you know it, the hand is there and it's going in the mouth. This hole, we know it's not that hole. We're deeply trained. And then the assumption is that when I get it, I'll get happy. So the assumption we have of happiness is what you get when attachment gets what it wants. So naturally, that determines all the things we do, even if we're nice people as well. You know, we're talking the negative states now, which is a difficult word to hear because it sounds like punitive, it sounds negative, it sounds moralistic, but it's not meant to be. It's a technical term to understand these states of mind. And why they're so hard to see is because they come along with what we call the positive ones. Love, compassion, empathy, kindness, generosity. We all know these as well. But the trouble is they come together mixed like a big soup, you know. So this is why we need these focusing techniques. We need to have this basic knowledge of this model so I can then begin to observe the conceptual stories, the assumptions that feed my emotions. And the trouble is we only notice, like I said before, you know, I'd only know I was angry when my attachment didn't get what it wanted. So, you know, we might, you know, you and me might go and have a piece of chocolate cake. Oh, let's have chocolate cake. We look like we're happy. We enjoy chocolate cake. But look what happens when carrot cake comes instead. That's the sign. You might go, oh, I can handle carrot cake, that's cool, and you proceed to enjoy. I will go, excuse me, I ordered chocolate cake and get upset. That's the proof that I had this assumption of attachment, which is this dissatisfaction, this constant manipulation to get what I want, this making the thing look more delicious than it really is and building up a story in my mind that it is more delicious than it really is, and then the absolute expectation that when I get it, it will bring me what my attachment believes. And what the Buddha's saying is all of this, they're stinking rotten lies, but they're so deeply ingrained in us we can't identify until we start going deep inside, because they're so automatic. We don't even think they're conceptual. It seems like a joke to think it's a conceptual thought, you know, but they're conceptual at a very subtle level. And we need to get into that level and begin to see these assumptions. And then when you change those assumptions, naturally, then you train yourself to see that it's an assumption and a neediness and an expectation and an exaggeration of the deliciousness, and you start to change that story. You do this cognitive therapy in your own head. You argue with yourself. Your positive ones argue with the negative stories, and you get to see logically how they're not an accurate story. You don't put yourself down for it. You don't feel guilty. Oh, I shouldn't feel this. You hear the stories. You're very rational and clear about it. And this is hard work, you know. Then you literally change your assumption about the cake. You change your definition of it. You change your view of it. So when you do get the carrot cake, you can also go, oh, that's cool, I can handle carrot cake. So I can say over the years, I don't have many so-called realizations, as they say in Buddhism, you know. But this job, I have enthusiasm for it. I can see to some extent that I've done it, it works. So I can say without question, the things that would have made me completely crazy, angry, literally don't now. Not because I'm not because of a miracle, not because I'm such a genius or such a deep yogi, because I've changed my interpretation of things, changed the way I interpret the world. And that's one way of saying really what you're doing, being a Buddhist or a communist or whatever you are. You know, it's a series of philosophical views about how things exist. So this is the level to which, if you try to use Buddhism, you try to do it at this level of changing your assumptions. Really, it's, you know, Buddhist psychology is kind of hidden to the world. As for mentioning it's coming from the Hindus, that's really a shock to us. Even most Indians, as His Holiness says, don't know the remarkable background from their great yogis over the centuries, you know. And even most people who think or even practice Buddhism, we don't go into the mind in great depth. But this is the key, actually, of using the Buddha's skills. Not looking like a holy person in my 14th century Tibetan robes, not having a bald head, not doing prostrations and holy things and saying prayers, you know. The bottom line is, if you're using these techniques that come from the Buddha, which are these rational, clear, focusing, hard, disciplined techniques to enable you to know the contents of your mind, not with a microscope on the brain, but with a microscope of your mind, knowing your thoughts, knowing what they are. So Robert's point about, you know, almost like, another way of putting it, embracing the things that trigger your unhappy feelings, the discomfort, as he said. This is marvellous. We've got to greet these things, but we've got to have a clear view of what they are, you know. Welcoming your anger and welcoming your jealousy and welcoming the fears doesn't mean you're sort of patting them on the head and saying it's okay. You've got to know how they cause you suffering. You've got to know how they cause you pain, not out of guilt, but like knowing that certain food will bring you belly aches. You've got to know it, not guilty. Guilt is meaningless. Guilt is useless. Guilt is just ego. But having this clear understanding of your mind, knowing what causes, knowing all the different thoughts, unravelling them, and recognising really clearly the ones that cause you pain. So when we usually with moralistic stuff, we tend to have guilt, you know? And I think that's our view of morality. Our view of morality is doing something that someone else said. Immorality is doing something that someone else shouldn't do. Like in my house with my mummy, she says, don't do that when I'm little. I guarantee you when I say why not, that she will say because I say so. And that's our view of morality. And not criticising, but that's also the creator religious view. I asked a Jesuit priest friend of mine, do these people warn me of my time or something? Nothing yet. Okay. 24, 23 what? What's that mean, please? They didn't tell me. What's 2018 mean? Is that all I've got left? Oh my gosh, I better stop then. I just thought I got started. Sorry. It looks like I have to stop. Okay. That's it. 0.
If you go to this supermarket and shouting, I want to buy peace of mind, then people laughing or people feel that person's mind is something wrong.
Now, this word connections is a really interesting one because our kids today are more connected than ever.
Of course, then when you're in an institution, people call you up. They tell you to perk up. Yeah, perk up, because I didn't think of that.
I should have a happiness project, I decided. As soon as I have some free time, I'm going to do that.